Welcome to Staffworks Explain. If you are here for the first time, please consider subscribing to this channel. In this video, we'll be talking about the rising water of Lake Baringo in Kenya, and we'll be asking ourselves, can Lake Baringo rising water become Kenya's next agricultural frontier? We'll be looking at the government plan to drain the lake, or is it diverting the water that has seen this lake surge for the last 10 years? For more than a decade, Lake Baringo has steadily reclaimed the land surrounding it. We have homes disappearing beneath the water. We have schools and roads which have been abandoned. Hotels that were once lined along the shore have been forced to close or relocate. We have thousands of families who have watched productive land become part of an expanding lake. What was initially viewed as an environmental phenomenon has evolved into one of the Kenya's most complex development challenges, involving disaster management, climate adaptation, infrastructure planning, environmental conservation, as well as food security. The government's latest proposal, which is to divert excess water from the lake and use it to irrigate more than 100,000 acres of land across two counties, that is Baringo and Turkana. This signals a shift from responding to a crisis towards attempting to convert it into an economic opportunity. Yet, like any project of this magnitude, success will depend not on the aspiration of the proposal, but on the quality of planning, engineering, financing, environmental management, as well as long-term governance. Lake Baringo lies in the Kenya's North Rift Valley, approximately 290 kilometers northwest of Nairobi. It is one of the country's few freshwater lakes in Rift Valley, within the Rift Valley systems, and occupies a unique ecological position. Unlike its neighboring Lake Bogoria, which is highly saline and alkaline, the lake supports freshwater fisheries, bird life, crocodiles, hippopotamus, and serves as a vital source of water for surrounding communities and livestock. Its ecological and economic importance has made changes in its water levels as a national concern rather than a purely local issue. The current crisis did not emerge overnight. Since around 2010, the lake has experienced a sustained rise in water levels, driven by a combination of prolonged periods of above average rainfall, increased inflow from rivers feeding the lake, changing climatic patterns across the Rift Valley, and broader hydrological processes that scientists continue to study. While no single factor fully explains this phenomenon, the cumulative impact has been dramatic. Government estimates indicate that the lake has risen by between 12 and 14 meters over the last 15 years, accumulating roughly 2 billion cubic meters of additional water. The scale of that rise is difficult to visualize. According to government analysis, the additional volume alone would be sufficient to meet Nairobi's domestic, commercial, and industrial water demand for approximately 6 years and the current consumption levels. Such figures illustrate both severity of flooding and an enormous quantity of water now stored within the lake. The consequences have been profound. Entire settlements have been displaced as expanding shorelines swallowed homes and public infrastructure. Roads that once connected communities have been cut off, forcing expensive diversion and disrupting transport. Schools, health facilities, tourism establishments, and public utilities have suffered extensive damage. Agricultural land bordering the lake has disappeared beneath the rising water, reducing household incomes and increasing food insecurity for affected families. Tourism has suffered significantly. The lake has long been recognized as one of the Kenya's premier destinations for bird watching, boating, as well as cultural tourism. As the shoreline shifted inland, several lodges, camps, and recreational facilities found themselves partially submerged or rendered inaccessible. The economic losses have extended beyond businesses, where locals and owners who once lived good livelihoods and dependent on tourism are heavily affected. Government estimates suggest that approximately 380,000 people living within the lake basin are either directly affected or remain at risk from the economic or from the continued expansion of the Rift Valley lakes. The humanitarian implications are substantial, but so are the financial costs associated with the repeated disaster response, compensation, infrastructure reconstruction, and emergency support. It is against this backdrop that the State Department of Irrigation has proposed an ambitious intervention designed to address two national priorities simultaneously: reduce flood pressure around the lake while expanding irrigated agriculture in Kenya arid and semi-arid counties. The proposal involves constructing evacuation tunnels together with a network of primary, secondary, and tertiary canals that would divert excess water from the lake into the irrigation schemes covering more than 100,000 acres across the counties of Baringo and Turkana. Primary canals would transport large volumes of water over long distances, while secondary and tertiary ones would distribute this water progressively to the farms within the irrigation network. Together, they would form an integrated water delivery system capable of supporting commercial scale agriculture in areas that currently rely heavily on erratic rainfall. The project will be financed through the public-private partnership, commonly referred to as PPP. In this model, the government collaborates with private sector to develop major infrastructure projects. Rather than relying entirely on public funds, the private partners contribute capital, technical expertise, as well as operational capacity, while covering the investment over an agreed period through contractual arrangement like that. PPPs have become increasingly common where governments seek to undertake large infrastructure projects without placing immediate constraint on national budgets. Technical studies and feasibility assessments are already underway, indicating that the proposal remains in its planned and appraisal phase rather than the construction stage. These studies are intended to determine whether the engineering design is technically viable, whether there is financial sustainability, whether environmentally this project is acceptable, and the social benefits before the implementation starts. From a project management perspective, this feasibility phase is arguably the most critical stage of the entire initiative. Large infrastructure projects frequently encounter difficulties not because of poor construction but because of inadequate planning. Accurate hydrological modeling will be essential to determine how much water can safely be diverted without destabilizing the lake, especially ecosystems, or creating unintended downstream consequences. Geological investigation must establish whether proposed tunnels alignments are structurally suitable. Financial models will be needed to demonstrate the projected agricultural returns, that they justify the enormous capital investment required. Stakeholder management will equally be important. Communities living around the lake, pastoralists in Turkana County, conservation agencies, as well as environmental experts, county governments, and private investors all have legitimate interest in the project's outcome. Failure to adequately consult affected communities could generate resistance, land dispute, or implementation delays that often characterize complex infrastructure projects. The government decision to involve the State Department of Defense in overseeing construction reflects the anticipated scale and logistic complexity of the works. Military engineering units have historically participated in large national infrastructure projects where specialized engineering capability, rapid mobilization, or operation in difficult terrain are required. If implemented successfully, the potential benefits could be transformative. The irrigation of more than 100,000 acres would represent one of the largest agricultural expansion projects in Kenya's history. For comparison, this would exceed 3 times the area of country's largest fully developed public irrigation scheme at Mwea. Such an expansion could significantly increase domestic food production at a time when Kenya requires or continues to experience recurrent droughts, rising food imports, and increasing constraint on agricultural productivity. Reliable irrigation fundamentally changes agricultural economics. Farmers become less dependent on seasonal rainfall, allowing multiple planting seasons each year. We have high value crops and more predictable incomes. Commercial agriculture also stimulates investment in agro-processing, storage facilities, transport networks, as well as agricultural services. And this creates employment opportunities well beyond the farming itself. The proposal could further strengthen climate resilience. Climate resilience refers to the capacity of communities, economies, and ecosystems to withstand and adapt to changing climatic conditions without suffering long-term disruption. In practical terms, irrigation reduces vulnerability to prolonged drought by providing a stable water supply even when rainfall fails. The project also offers an opportunity to convert what is currently viewed as a destructive environmental problem into a productive natural resource. Rather than allowing excess water to continue damaging settlements and infrastructure, controlled diversion could simultaneously reduce flooding while supporting economic development. However, these projected benefits should not obscure the project's considerable risks. The first concern is environmental sustainability. The lake supports a delicate freshwater ecosystem that sustains fisheries, wildlife habitats, and biodiversity unique to the Rift Valley. Altering water level through artificial diversion requires continuous scientific monitoring to ensure ecological balance is maintained. Over diversion could create a new environmental challenge even as it solves the existing one. Equally important is the uncertainty surrounding the cause of lakes' rising water. If the increase results primarily from long-term climatic cycles or sustained hydrological changes, diversion may provide lasting relief. If, however, water levels fluctuate naturally over short periods, the infrastructure could eventually operate under very different conditions from those from which it was designed. Then we have financial sustainability, which presents another major challenge. Large-scale irrigation infrastructure demands enormous upfront capital investment, followed by substantial operation and maintenance costs throughout the lifespan. The systems require continuous desilting, structural inspection, vegetation management, and water regulations. Without adequate maintenance funding, many irrigation schemes gradually lose efficiency and eventually fail to deliver projected benefits. Public-private partnership also require careful construction design. While PPPs can mobilize private investment and technical expertise, poorly structured agreements may expose government to excessive financial obligations, revenue guarantees, or dispute over operational responsibilities. Transparent procurement as well as balanced risk allocations and contract management will therefore be essential. Land acquisition represents another potential source of project risk. Constructing across two counties will require access to privately owned land, community owned, and publicly owned land. Compensation processes, land rights, verification, and community engagement must be managed carefully to avoid prolonged legal disputes that frequently delay infrastructure delivery. Operational governance should not be underestimated either. Once completed, the project will require coordinated management across multiple government agencies responsible for irrigation, agriculture, environmental protection, and water resources, as well as county government administration. Without clearly defined institutional responsibilities, infrastructure of this scale can suffer from fragmented oversight and inconsistent decision making. Perhaps the most significant measure of success will not be whether canals are constructed or tunnels excavated. It will be whether the project delivers measurable long-term outcomes, reduced flooding or damage around the lake, increased agricultural productivity, improved household incomes, stronger food security, sustainable management of one of the Kenya's most environmentally significant freshwater lakes. The government proposal reflects an increasingly important principle in modern development planning. Disaster can sometimes be transformed into development opportunities when supported by sound science, rigorous planning, and effective execution. Yet, aspirations alone are never sufficient. Infrastructure projects succeed through disciplined project governance, evidence-based decision-making, transparent financing, and sustained political commitment long after groundbreaking ceremonies have been completed. The lake rising water have already rewritten the geography of communities that have lived beside it for generations. Whether this new irrigation initiative becomes a model of climate adaptation or another costly infrastructure lesson will depend on decisions made long before the front or the first tunnel is excavated. If managed with technical discipline, environmental responsibility, and accountable leadership, the project has the potential to redefine northern Kenya's agricultural landscape while reducing one of the country's longest running environmental crises. If those fundamentals are overlooked, the country risks replacing one challenge with another at enormous economic and ecological cost. So thank you for reaching this far. If you are here for the first time, please consider subscribing to this channel. You can also watch other videos that we have made on different topics. So let's meet in the next one.